What is up? Happy Tuesday, May 9th. Another episode of Go Fud Yourself. We have actually it's going to be this way, a new guest today. Obviously doesn't look like Kiara, but it is Christine. She's one of the co-founders of Tashi Finance. It's a project that Rome Blockchain Labs is incubating. Super excited. Christine, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. Okay, so today, episode 57. How many have you seen?
Me?
Yeah. Not that
half
many.
Half of one. I did watch half of one, but then I got interrupted. So that was
that was the end of it. All right. Well, I can't believe we waited this long to have somebody from Tashi on here, but super excited to have you on. We're not going to talk about Tashi today too much, but if people want to check you out, what's the Telegram? Where do they go to check out Tashi? It's not live yet, so it's a good time to learn about a new protocol. Where do they find you?
Well, you can find us on
Twitter. I think it's Tashi Finance.
Tashi_finance. And from there, you can join our Telegram. We are a very small, loving community currently, but we are always accepting new people.
Right. We just came out of stealth like only a few days ago. So it's pretty exciting. All right. So today's episode, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, a little bit maybe outside of your wheelhouse, but we'll just roll with it. And hopefully we get some good information out.
Basically, I think I'm here for you to like bounce ideas off yourself. Yeah.
Sure. You can just be the sounding board. So today we're going to talk about de-dollarization, something we've been talking about on many episodes over the last couple of weeks. That's pretty important. De-dollarization, what's happening with BRICS, so on and so forth. We're going to talk a little bit about some CBDCs because I know everybody loves CBDCs. We're going to talk about the Bank of Canada. What else? What else we got? Oh, BitREX filing for bankruptcy. Why is that relevant? Do we care? And then we're going to talk, we're going to pay homage to Cosmos because that's where Tashi is launching. We're going to talk a little bit about some interesting Cosmos news, what that means, what we should expect from it. Sound good? You ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do it. Okie dokie, welcome back. So we're gonna do a quick shout out. Today, I'm shouting out to Tashi. So part of the deal was you had to send me some merch for you to get on the podcast. So here you are, you sent some merch.
Correct, thank you. I expected you to wear the hoodie, but I mean, I've heard that it's hot.
It's a little hot in my house. Hopefully that's gonna be fixed today, so all good. What do you got on? Who are you repping today? Krypton. What? There. Our friends at Krypton. I've got a lot of Krypton merch too. If you haven't heard of Krypton, guys, check it out. Really cool next generation type of AMM that's really going to change the game, in my opinion. Some of the smartest people I know that are working on it. It's not live yet, but definitely worth checking out. Super cool. All right. So we're going to move right into it. Christine, we're going to start with de-dollarization. Actually, we're going to talk this one first. So BRICS, like we've been talking about this for the last, feels like a lifetime, but probably for the last 2, 3, 4 weeks now. So what's happening with BRICS is there's a whole bunch of nations that are saying, hey, we don't love the sanctions and the geopolitics that are being facilitated on the back of the US dollar as the reserve currency for global trade. So they said, okay, well, if we don't like what the US is doing, if they're overreaching with their currency as a reserve currency, we're going to start our own trade currency structure so that we can transact without having to touch US dollars.
There's actually 120.
120 what?
Countries that aren't aligned with either side of this thing.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch that are like kind of in the middle. But what's important here is many major economic powers, specifically in the resource sector, are combining to kind of go against the US dollar if the US isn't involved in the transaction. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about this. So obviously it's maybe not obviously to most people, but it should be known that it is an existential risk, I think, to the economy in the US if we become dethroned, so to speak, as the global reserve currency and the currency for global trade. It will have very, very significant impacts on our economy, on national security, geopolitics, and a whole bunch of other things. Anyways, so what Kiara and I were talking about a few times, and this is kind of interesting now leading into the BRICS summit. So there's a summit that's happening in June, I think.
August.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
No, I think it's in June. No, it's in June. And so 19 other nations have already either formally or informally requested to join. And some of those nations are meaningful trade partners with the US, generally speaking, but also on the receiving end of many sanctions. So examples of that could be China. Brazil is not really on the receiving end of sanctions, but then we've got like Iran and some of the Middle Eastern countries that are Dubai, I think UAE is looking at this. Again, being kind of petro regions of the world, this is huge for international trade, and they're going to transact, I believe, they're talking about using just their local currencies for all of those transactions and facilitating that through foreign exchange. And then they're talking eventually about considering CBDCs, which we're going to talk about later. Or maybe not so much a CBDC, but some unified currency, maybe the digital yuan, which is Chinese CBDC. Not 100% certain on that one yet. Nonetheless, Egypt. This was in the news today. Modern Diplomacy is the source for this one. Bloomberg was the source for the last one. Egypt is saying, yeah, we want we want in. We're not loving the way that US dollar hegemony has been going for us. Egypt obviously is, has its own domestic issues and so on, which is again why they're probably not wanting to be under the thumb of the US. What do you think about this? I mean, do you follow global macroeconomics that much?
I do not follow global macroeconomics too much. I have looked into this. I think it's massive. And I think they're not just talking about using a specific CBDC, but they're talking about creating their own currency. And so where that puts us with the US dollar, like you said, it's a scary position to be in, because we have the US on our side saying, don't worry, it's not a problem. Nobody can break us. Nobody can break us. But I mean, that's what you have to tell your troops to make them keep fighting. But who believes that, right? And it puts a little bit of, I don't know, it makes people scared as to where we're actually going, because we can see the patterns, we can see what's happening, and we're at a place where by sanctioning these other countries, we're hurting ourselves, because we end up all these other players are going to join together now, and they have the ability to do so, because where before, there wasn't the ability to just connect and create their own system to transfer money and do whatever. It's super easy for them now. So we've kind of put the ball in their hands, saying like, okay, we're not going to play with you. Then they're like, fine, then we'll play. We don't have to play with you anymore. We don't have to be a part of your system. And that puts us in a really bad spot. So I just think, I mean, if you're not paying attention, you're doing yourself a pretty big disservice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've been beating on this drum since we started talking about it. It's, there's, for the last century or so, plus or minus a few years, probably, the US has used economic sanctions to keep the world more or less in line. And one of the reasons for that was the SWIFT interbank transfer system. The US had effectively a monopoly over what SWIFT could and couldn't do. So a lot of the sanctions, there's economic sanctions like trade sanctions, which don't necessarily involve the US dollar, but it's the transfer of money. So as an example, they could say, well, Russia, anybody in Russia, including oligarchs and whoever else, is no longer able to use the SWIFT system, any of the Russian banks or anybody. So they can't transfer money anywhere. And what was happening, actually, to even make that worse from the Russian perspective, not saying that this is right or wrong, but what's making that worse is they're seizing assets globally of these Russian people, because they're in US dollars in most of these banks. And so Russia, I mean, from their perspective, again, taking my opinion, our perspective out of it, Russia's saying, hey, our people don't believe we're doing anything wrong. We don't believe we're doing anything wrong. They think they're doing the right thing, which is really important. And they're saying, okay, so we think we're doing what's in our national best interest, but a country, some other country is trying to penalize us and essentially disable our economic participation on a global scale, period, because they don't like what we're doing. Well, we might not be able to beat them militarily, but we don't need to be under their thumb from an economic perspective. So I think, you know, to your point, it's something that absolutely needs to be considered. You know, what are the impacts? I don't know. It's not like all of a sudden the US dollar is going to become irrelevant completely. It's just going to be much less relevant than it is currently.
I mean, this is not financial advice. This is not even, you know, this is nowhere near properly educated advice. But as somebody who's watching this, it feels like watching the beginning of a slow roll down, you know, when you're like, okay, I mean, things are changing, times are changing, you know, and you can't deny it. You can't just say, no, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, because we can see it happening. I mean, there's connections now that they weren't before. So
technology, right? Like technology has just enabled this.
Yep.
So on that point, Crypto Newsflash came out with an article, I believe yesterday, that said Bank of America. Now you have to take this with a grain of salt. So part of the show, Go Fund Yourself, the whole purpose is to dispel some FOMO and dispel some FUD, and try to just get to like, what are these articles actually saying? Right? We want to get away from the clickbait and all the crap that they use in these headlines. So anyways, Bank of America, from their perspective, is saying, we don't believe that BRICS or the yuan or crypto even is an alternative to the US dollar. They may have some points there. I don't think as a blanket alternative to the US dollar, as in US dollar is dethroned and the rest of the world uses those currencies. But I think there's a lot of ways to enable that. Anyways, I'll ask for your opinion on this in a sec, but Bank of America more or less said that there's no currency that can replace the US dollar, maybe Bitcoin, which I completely disagree with. Bitcoin could be, in my opinion, Bitcoin could maybe be the network that a lot of this happens on, because it's probably, well, not probably, it is for sure the most decentralized network that exists. It's been around for quite a long time. It's got pretty good staying power. And you could package things to transact on the Bitcoin network, but there's got to be faster, cheaper, more efficient ways to do it. Bitcoin is really slow and quite expensive on the main chain. So there's some really interesting Lightning Network and a few other things that are happening for smart contracts on top of Bitcoin. That's pretty cool. But anyways, what are your thoughts on this? Why would Bank of America come out with such a strong opinion on this?
Because one, they have to say something, and two, they're going to throw out Bitcoin because it's not strongly affiliated with anything. So it's getting people used to the idea that there's going to be some sort of digital currency that is going to happen. They're acknowledging the fact, but they don't have to stake a claim in any one camp right now, because by saying Bitcoin to the average person, Bitcoin means cryptocurrency, means whatever. I think it's really interchangeable. I mean, for people who are in the space, obviously that's not true, but to the general public, they're saying, yeah, we kind of like agree with this, and that we see that this is going somewhere, but don't worry about anything else, you know. But I think it's their way of getting, you know, an edge in there without having to commit to anything, right? They can see that it's going in that direction. Every country is talking about their central bank digital currency, so they have to get people used to this idea of like, this is happening. We want you to accept it, but we want you to accept it on our terms. But we're going to slowly start to trickle these words into here so that it becomes familiar, you know?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, and you made a really good point a few minutes ago with respect to the slippery slope. That's what I would call it is. I mean, these things are it's like straws on the camel's back. You know, they're kind of nothing. And eventually you look at it and you go, whoa, how did this happen? Like, how did we get this far? And I think I mean, we can see that all throughout society right now. We're seeing that with the crazy political divide in the US. We're seeing that with, I don't know, gender ideology. We're seeing that with all these other things that everybody's like, wait a second. How did all of a sudden Democrats and Republicans become like so like militantly against each other without even objectively looking at their positions they're taking. They're just saying, oh, this is what the Republicans think. Okay, well, I blanket don't think that. Or this is what the Dems think. Okay, I blanket disagree.
I feel like that's really the natural curve, though. Like everybody kind of like goes out to the edges, and then they're like, we can't do this, and then it comes crashing back in the middle, and then everybody's like, no, we have our own opinions, and that's kind of like
it's a pendulum. I think it's like a pendulum, right? Like it goes from one extreme to the other, and ideally we want it to kind of to linger in the middle a little bit. But this is an interesting one, because sometimes the pendulum, instead of shifting back, it just shifts. The whole pendulum shifts to a different position. And this could be one of those events. We're using a whole bunch of anecdotes here that are kind of confusing, but this could be the one. I mean, I hope not, but this could be the one that changes the way that, you know, we're approaching global trade. And I mean,
well, I don't even know if that's a negative thing. I think that, I mean, without having to take a stance, having an open mind to it, I mean, this might be something that, I mean, currently right now, the way it's working is not working, right? We objectively can see that whatever we're doing here, whatever hard stances that we're taking is leading us into this spot where other people around us that we're supposed to be playing ball with are like, we don't want to play with you anymore. So I think that even though it's super scary, and I'm not necessarily for it, there might be some loss of power, just talking it through, it might make more, I don't know. I don't even want to go there and say it might make more sense, because it's not that I agree with that, but I think that we have to observe it and say, this might be what this new reality looks like.
Well, it's going to be pretty hard to walk it back too, right? So the system isn't working as it stands, notwithstanding all of the inefficiencies in the SWIFT system generally. I mean, there's no way in 2023 that it takes 3 to 5 business days to transfer money globally. Like, it's insane. That to me is absolutely insane, the way that whole system and structure works. It still requires people and all of this other crap. So, but notwithstanding that, I think it's very hard to walk back what the US and other kind of Western powers have done via sanctions. Like, we can say, hey, okay, we're gonna drop the SWIFT sanctions. They won't, because that would show weakness, and we don't want to show weakness. But nobody's going to believe them anyways, because they've done this consistently for the last 100 years. Well, pretty much ever since Second World War, we've kind of been the world's police in the US. And I mean, I think, my opinion, this is just my opinion, but I mean, I think we should just focus on strengthening everything domestically. You know, let's just make sure that if we're going to have a military, we first protect homeland. Let's forget all these wars globally, forever wars. Let's forget sticking our nose in everybody else.
Conversation outside of
yeah, we can probably spend.
But that's how this starts, because it's all based on economy, right? Like, if you don't support yourself first, like, it's all great to throw sanctions onto other countries, but if you don't have your own self backed up, if you can't be self-sustained, then what? When people walk away, what do you do, right? Like, you have to keep investing in yourself and building up yourself and being able to be, I mean, of course, like, international trade and all of that is important, and it would be great if we could all just play nice and get along and have great trade routes and perfect. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not investing into yourself as a country, as a human, as an anything, like, there's going to be a breakdown, right?
Yeah. And from the outside, it seems easy, right? It's easy for us to armchair quarterback this, excuse me, by saying, on one hand, we've offshored a lot of stuff to keep supply chains more efficient, to keep costs down, increase consumerism in the US, to benefit US companies where they get all of their raw materials and early processed products from other countries. That all makes sense. But the counterbalance to that is, now we're at the mercy of a lot of these global supply chains. Example, Taiwan. Taiwan is of critical strategic interest to the US because they build all of the processing chips that we use for our sophisticated technology. Well, there's no other reason that we would be that concerned about a potential conflict between China and Taiwan. So in an effort to cut costs, we've offshored all of that stuff. We've given essentially a monopoly to Taiwan. They've been willing to work with us and not give their super high-end tech to the Chinese. But I mean, But why? Why are we actually doing that? And now the government is trying to, reshore a lot of this stuff. But anyways, we could probably spend hours talking about this, but we're gonna move on a little bit. Maybe we'll do another show on just politics. JD and Christine on global politics. But anyways, there's some other types of de-dollarization. Maybe not types, but other ways to kind of look at how de-dollarization may come about, rather than just BRICS being kind of the major opponent to USD hegemony, and that is CBDCs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, India. This is from CoinDesk. India is really starting to push CBDC adoption. They're expecting 1 million users in the next 3 months. Currently, there's already 100,000 that have used it, which is pretty impressive.
In 3 months, something like that.
Since December 1st, 2022. So like 6 months, yeah. But either way, that's still pretty good adoption. But what they're really trying to do with this is they're not necessarily just trying to deal with international transactions by having a CBDC, but this is actually a fairly consumer-focused version of this. And so that's interesting. They're almost trying to replace the Indian fiat currency slowly.
What's interesting to me is they're working on a solution for off-chain because of how their country's set up, because there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of people who don't generally have access to all of these things, like how to make that work within their country, which is amazing.
Yeah. Like, I've seen some really cool concepts come out of like Africa and different things. Jambo, company called Jambo. I think you know them too, but really, really cool group. They were presenting at Medici conference last week. And one of their big things is they've created a smartphone with crypto enablement on it that they can sell for $99 US. And it'll have all the security of hardware wallets and all of that stuff, and text, basic functions as a smartphone, but very cheap technology so that it can get in the hands of many more users. Surprisingly, a lot of people in Africa don't have electricity or all these other things, but they have cell phones somehow. But a lot of people don't, right? And that's one of a lot of people don't even have ID in Africa. So like, this is really one of those things. I think we'll see something similar probably emerge in India and the like, to make it, a lot more accessible. But one of the things with CBDCs is like a lot of countries are talking about just using them to facilitate foreign trade instead of having to use Forex and SWIFT. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense, but I think it's interesting here to see that India is targeting the consumer market. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, Canada is too, I think, though. They came out with a thing that said that they're doing a survey of the people.
Good segue. Yeah. Canada, has done some things that maybe I don't necessarily agree with. They have essentially elected everything. Any digital currency is a security in Canada. So if you're going to participate as a Canadian resident and or as a business serving Canadian residents or citizens, you have to register with IROC and Canadian Securities Association and all this other shit. But anyways, what I do like is that at the very least, it might not be perfect, but they're trying. They're trying to engage this. They're saying, hey, we don't want to push away innovation in Canada. And they've really started to work diligently now on their own CBDC, which, I mean, Canada is inextricably married to the US. Like, I really think the US should just absorb Canada and call it a day. That'll probably never happen, but I think that's what should happen, because Canada has no means of national security without the US, no means, like 70 or 80% of foreign exports are to the US directly from Canada.
Because nobody even wants to try with Canada, for such a I'm not saying anybody should. Sorry. I love Canada, but
yeah, I mean, it's a resource-rich country, right? And there's a ton of land, so it would make sense.
It's interesting. Like they can get away with just sitting there,
Yeah. So, you were mentioning some stuff about some of the surveys and stuff. What did you read on that?
I was reading that. So Canada has sent out this survey to figure out what people want from their central bank digital currency. What do they want it to be able to provide? Sorry, I have somebody calling me over and over and over again. If you're wondering why I look like I'm losing my mind, it's because I'm blocking this call. But they, yeah,
That's what I'd say too.
But it's interesting that they are appearing to put out there that, they want information from the people, because what they want to do is get them to buy in. They want to make it feel like it's your choice.
Right.
And they said they understand that, there's always going to be people who use cash and they're not going to take that away, but they really want to know, like, what is it that you want? Because we're already using bank cards and credit cards. So why wouldn't we just go digital with our currency, And it's a much softer approach than trying to force it down your throat. It makes you want to buy into the narrative, which I think is interesting. It's a different way to tie people in.
So that's actually a really interesting point. Let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So you lived in Canada, as far as I understand, when the trucker nonsense was happening there.
100%.
So one of the arguments against CBDCs, and Kiara and I have made this point, probably more me than her, but I've made this point a lot because I'm pretty convicted on it, that CBDCs, in my opinion, are absolutely the antithesis of what we're trying to accomplish with blockchain. It puts all of the power and control in the hands of the federal government. And even banking has traditionally been one step removed from federal government control. So, I mean, you have some protection from your bank against government overstep until in Canada, they employed emergency powers and froze bank accounts of anybody that was participating. Do you see the CBDC thing maybe going down the same path globally?
100%. That's what it's all about. It's about being able to better track people, and it's for your own good, isn't it? So that's the whole, like, Canadian narrative, is we're going to sell you this beautiful thing that's out to protect you and is here for you and make it easy and accessible for you. And, but really, it's all big government. It's what it is everywhere. It's being able to have oversight and control. And of course it's easier. And of course they're going to say, they're keeping up with the times. But I do believe that I don't think that you're going to be able to stop it. But like you said, being there when they froze everybody's bank account, they froze bank accounts of restaurants that gave coffees or meals or sent food to these people. They froze the business accounts of companies. It's not just individual people. Like, it was a massive overreach, and they'll be able to do that. They'll be able to do a lot of things, but I mean, that's kind of where we're going. So on that note, I think it's interesting because I think that the implication might be that people get more, as they become more aware of digital currencies, it's going to kind of maybe work against the government, because as they make them more aware, trying to get them comfortable with the idea of a digital currency, and as people start to realize how much control that gives the government, because they already have knowledge from this central bank digital currency, it might not be such a reach or such a step to get into the idea of something that is not controlled by government, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like something that's not backed by a dollar. So not necessarily like USDC or something that's tied to a specific dollar amount. Not that I'm saying that USDC is going to crash, but there's something that's actually pegged as much as possible from any specific place.
Yeah.
That would be like the people's currency, right? Like, if you want to put money into something that you believe is the most decentralized as possible, I think by the government kind of, bringing this into your life, it's a double-edged sword for them, because once you have knowledge, you have power, right? Like,
Yeah.
the more exposed you are, it's not such a big jump anymore. What was big and scary is now not. So I think it could go both ways. I think it could be great. I mean, we have to want to believe it's going to go that way, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Sounds like we could continue this conversation for hours. We are bumping up on time, so we'll have to talk about BRICS tomorrow. And Christine, maybe we'll have to have you back to talk a little bit more about Cosmos and some of the stuff that's happening there. We will talk here quickly about one Cosmos related thing, just because I think it's very interesting. So Blockworks is reporting that, and many other outlets, we'll put all the links underneath the videos here, but that Neutron had to go through a proposal for the Cosmos DAO to allow what they're calling replicated security to launch consumer-facing app chains. And so Neutron is the first one on Cosmos. What does that mean in your mind, Christine, for other applications in Cosmos now that this is a precedent?
So I live and play in the world of Cosmos on Evmos. I think that the reason why we picked there in the first place is because the interoperability, the ability to, connect with everything else. Sorry, what did you say? Oh, I thought you were talking. Yeah, I think all of it is important. The faster you can do things, the cheaper you can do things, the more accessible you can make it. We're just trying to bring more people into our world. And the whole idea is that it's easy, it's accessible, it allows for more people to what would cost too much. Otherwise you can do now. So I think, like borrowing security is not a terrible idea, keeping it decentralized as much as possible. But
yeah, I think just to build on that, just as we wrap up here, I think what's really compelling about this is that just using shared replicated security of Cosmos, effectively what you're doing is any app chain then becomes up there in the top 10 chains generally in terms of security, because the economic security of a chain is based on the amount of assets that are locked in total for the validators.
Yeah, you said it's cheaper. It gives more opportunity to people.
Yeah. So they can do sophisticated financial products without having to have billions of dollars staked somehow, which takes forever to be able to do. So very exciting. We have some other really cool stuff to talk about with respect to Cosmos, but we are out of time. So Christine, we're going to have you back. Thank you a ton for joining us today. I think we're probably going to find out that all of these guests we've had recently, I'm going to get voted off the island. You guys are killing it. Thank you so much, everybody. If you want to check out Tashi.finance or Tashi_finance and Tashi.finance, there's some interesting wait lists and some cool stuff if you want to check it out. Like, share, subscribe, do all that shit, hammer those buttons. We're trying to help spread the lack of FUD. We're trying to help people just assess the space, learn about the space, learn about what's going on without all the hyperbole and all of that stuff. So if you can share, bookmark if you're on Twitter, that really helps. Bookmark the streams when you see them. Comment, we love it. And we can absolutely go from there. Christine, go FUD yourself.